Sepp Blatter went to prison for corruption. Gianni Infantino is on track to make him look like a warm-up act, and I say that as someone who never thought I'd type those words in that order. 10 years ago, Infantino walked into FIFA promising the opposite of everything Blatter stood for: transparency, accountability, no more brown envelopes. And somehow, I genuinely don't understand the mechanics of this. He has found a way to be more hated than the guy who got banned from football for taking bribes. Not despite doing things the right way, because of how he's doing things the right way. Here's what just happened. FIFA, all 211 member nations, received a letter. Not a memo, not a rumor leaked to a journalist. An official letter from the FIFA president himself, laying out a plan to sell a slice of FIFA's commercial operations: broadcasting, sponsorship, ticketing, licensing, the World Cup and Club World Cup brand itself, to private investors. Reported price tag, somewhere in the region of £15 billion. And attached to that letter isn't just an invitation. It's a countdown. Sign on, back the plan, and your nation gets access to a new funding pool worth up to $40 million. Sit on the fence past a 53-day deadline, and that number doesn't stay at $40 million. It drops by 75%. Wait even longer, and you're locked out completely. Read that again. A 75% cut for hesitating. Not for saying no, for pausing. That's not a pitch deck. That's a pressure campaign aimed at the poorest football federations on earth, dressed up in the language of investment opportunity. Now, before we go further, let's actually steelman this, because Infantino and FIFA's PR machine have an answer ready. The official line: FIFA keeps full control of the sport itself. The rules, the competitions, the governance. Investors would only own a piece of the commercial machinery. And the money raised, they say, goes toward developing football in nations that can't currently afford academies, pitches, coaching programs, the stuff that actually grows the game in places like sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. On paper, that's not an insane pitch. Sport needs money to grow. Infrastructure isn't free. Here's the problem. Go look up what kind of organization FIFA legally is. Under Swiss Civil Code, FIFA is registered as a non-profit association. A non-profit, selling a multi-billion-pound stake in its commercial rights to private equity and sovereign-backed investment funds. You don't need a finance degree to smell something off there. Non-profits don't typically need institutional investors chasing returns. Investors don't hand over billions out of love for grassroots pitches in Lesotho. They hand over billions because they expect more billions back. And there's only one direction that money can come from. You, the fan, paying more for tickets, more for streaming, more for merchandise, more for a sponsor-branded stadium experience that used to just be a football match. Legally, Infantino himself doesn't pocket a cut from the sale directly. That's the technicality his defenders will lean on. But he doesn't need a direct cut. He needs FIFA to become one of the most commercially dominant entities in global sport. And he needs the people funding that transformation to owe him, personally, for making it happen. That's a currency that outlasts any single payday. And we've seen exactly where more commercial value leads, because it's already happening in front of us. 4 years ago, it was a 32-team World Cup. This year, it became 48. The tournament that just wrapped up barely a week ago, and there are already briefings floating around Zurich about pushing to 64. 16 groups of 4. Why stop the growth curve just because the trophy got handed out? And it's not just team count. There's live discussion about collapsing the 4-year World Cup cycle into a 2-year cycle. Club World Cup and Men's World Cup both, back to back to back, Copa America style, whenever the calendar's most profitable. More tournaments means more broadcast windows, more sponsor slots, more ticket sales. It doesn't mean more rest, more player welfare, or more competitive integrity. It means more product. Because here's the number nobody wants to sit with. A recent Players Union report found that top-tier players at clubs like Arsenal, PSG, Real Madrid, and Barcelona get roughly 12% of the year, less than 6 weeks, completely free of matches or training. 12%. You can say they're paid millions, they can deal with it, and sure, the money's real, but the bodies breaking down early are also real. Watch how many generational talents start picking up soft tissue injuries by 24, 25, and quietly fade by 28. That's not bad luck. That's a workload calendar built by people who don't have to run on it. Meanwhile, the fans funding all of this aren't getting a discount for their loyalty. Reports from this past World Cup had ordinary supporters, not corporate boxes, actual fans, spending anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 just to follow their national team through a handful of matches. Flights, tickets, hotels, all inflated by a tournament that knows demand is inelastic. People will pay it. That's exactly the problem, because when people will always pay it, there's no ceiling built into the system to stop it climbing again next cycle. And this isn't even Infantino's first attempt at this exact move. Back in 2018, he tried pushing through a similar private investment deal for the Club World Cup, reportedly backed by Saudi money, somewhere north of $20 billion, to blow that tournament up into a bigger, richer spectacle. It got buried under near universal condemnation. Nobody forgot. They just waited to see if he'd try again. He did. Here's what should actually stop you in your tracks. UEFA, European football's governing body, no stranger to inflating ticket prices and squeezing broadcast deals themselves, came out and condemned this plan as disgusting for the sport. When the organization that gave us Champions League ticket prices is the one calling you out for going too far, you have found a genuinely new low. And UEFA didn't hear about this from Infantino directly in some closed-door governance meeting where they had a say. They found out from a newspaper. A report from the Times broke the story before FIFA's own member confederations had any real briefing. The people who are supposed to co-govern the sport found out about a plan to sell its commercial soul at the same time the general public did, through the press. That's not an oversight. That's a decision. You don't accidentally forget to tell UEFA. You choose not to, because you already know what the answer would be. So where does this actually go? FIFA has 211 member nations. UEFA alone accounts for 53 of them. Technically, if enough small and mid-sized federations take the $40 million and vote yes, this plan could pass even without full European backing. But ask yourself honestly, is there a World Cup that means anything without Europe's giants involved? Without South America's giants? Argentina, Brazil, the nations that are the sport's history, if UEFA and CONMEBOL walk, the yes votes from federations chasing a $40 million lifeline don't save this plan. They just expose exactly who was bought and for how little. And that's the part that should actually make you angry, not just annoyed. Picture being the football federation of a small nation. Somewhere that genuinely could use $40 million for pitches, academies, women's football infrastructure, real development. Now picture being told, agree with the sale of the World Cup's commercial future, or lose 75% of that funding in 53 days. That's not a partnership offer. That's leverage aimed at the federations with the least power to say no. The big federations can afford to say no. The small ones can't afford to be seen saying no. That's exactly who this letter was engineered for. To be fair to Infantino, and I want to actually be fair here, this is currently a proposal, not a done deal. It hasn't been ratified. It might collapse under the exact backlash we're describing right now. FIFA's defenders will point out, correctly, that proposal isn't policy. But even if this specific deal dies, it tells you something that isn't going away. FIFA's president has now twice tried to sell a non-profit sports commercial soul to private capital. Twice. He's been caught doing it through leaked letters and press reports rather than open governance. And every single time football has expanded since he took over, more teams, more tournaments, higher prices, tighter calendars, it's moved in exactly one direction. Not toward the players, not toward the fans in the cheap seats, toward whoever's writing the biggest check. The World Cup isn't Gianni Infantino's to sell. It was never his personal asset to leverage, package, and shop around to sovereign wealth funds and private equity like a distressed piece of commercial real estate. His job was to grow the game. Somewhere along the way, growing the game quietly became growing the balance sheet. And he's betting that as long as the football is still good enough to watch, nobody will ask who actually owns it anymore. So here's the question worth sitting with after this video ends. If this deal somehow gets voted through, even without Europe, even without South America, what exactly are we all still watching? A World Cup or a product with a World Cup-shaped label on it? Drop your take in the comments, and if you think this is the moment football finally pushes back, make sure you're subscribed, because this fight over who actually owns the game is only getting louder from here.